Hi, my name is Hannah Hemmelgarn, and I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator at the Center for Agroforestry at MU. And today we will be inoculating shiitake logs. Before we get started, I want to just share a little bit about the life cycle of a mushroom. So what we know as a mushroom, this is a gilled mushroom that you might see growing in the woods, is actually just the fruiting body of a much larger mass, vegetative mass, of what's called mycelium. And mycelium comes about actually from the spores. This is a cycle, so there's no way to say what is the very beginning, but the spores of the mushroom are released from that fruiting body, and those individual spores can connect and form what's called hyphae, and those hyphae, under the right conditions, this is all under just the right conditions, can form this large body of mycelium. So this is often, if you've ever seen a piece of bark fall off of a dead log, and you see that white mass, sometimes kind of a web-looking material, that's mycelium. It's also in the ground, in the soil. It plays a really important role for plants to be able to uptake nutrients, and for woody material to be able to break down. We are totally dependent on fungi. And mushrooms are just one small part of this much larger kingdom of fungi. So we might think about these mycelium, the mycelium as roots, but fungi are not animals and they're not plants. They're in their totally own kingdom, and they're just one small part of that. So fungi are really important in the environment for a lot of reasons, many of which we still don't understand. But we are going to be growing edible culinary mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms. Shiitake mushrooms grow best on oak logs. They'll grow on some other materials. But what we see in this bag of what we call mushroom spawn is some mycelium and sawdust. So this is sawdust spawn, and the mycelium of the shiitake mushroom. So this is essentially like a cultivar. We call it a strain of mushrooms. So this is the west wind strain of shiitake. So this is set up so that the spawn can be transported from one place to another. So we'll try to mimic this process by introducing mycelium to an appropriate growing medium for this mushroom species. So to get started here, first we want to make sure we have the appropriate equipment. So you'll want to make sure you have some safety equipment for using these power tools. And there are lots of different ways to do this, some more low-tech than others. The really efficient way that we're going to be doing it here is with an angle grinder that has an adapter specifically for mushroom log inoculation. So this drill bit goes just to the depth that it needs to be, and this makes the process really fast. But if you're just doing a handful of logs, you can use a regular drill, power drill. And then we'll also be using this inoculator tool, a hand inoculator tool, to put that mycelium, that shiitake spawn, into the holes that we drill into this log. So let's get started. We'll turn the drill on, and I'm going to be drilling holes about 6 inches apart in a row, and then 2 inches between rows offset to form a diamond pattern. And we'll go all the way around the log like this. And you can see that I've just got this set up on a little sawhorse. And there are lots of ways to do this too. You can just use a single sawhorse if you're a small group of people, or if you want to do a lot of logs, get some friends together. You can do a setup like this with some wheels, or put them on a couple of pieces of wood and roll them down a couple of sawhorses, so that you have this ability to roll the logs as you're drilling and filling those holes with the sawdust spawn. And so the next step in this process then, this has a little canister at the end here, so I'm just going to put it into this spawn that I dumped out into the pot here so that it's easy to put in. And then I just line this up with the hole, And then I just want to make sure that it's nice and full, just to the level of the edge of the wood, or a little bit under that. So we are introducing the sawdust spawn, the mycelium, to this log. And the reason that we do the holes in this spacing are so that we get enough of that spawn into this growing medium, and also so that we're not making so many holes that the log is going to dry out. So that's really critical. When we harvested these logs, these oak logs, this would have otherwise been a waste product when we were cutting these trees, but we were able to save these smaller diameter branches and trunks for this purpose. So the size of the log you want to get is about 4 feet long and really no more than 6 inches in diameter. And the reason for that is because these will get really heavy when they are soaked to force the mushrooms to fruit. And these logs were harvested in the winter, and then we inoculate in the early spring before the summer heat. And sometimes if the holes aren't totally filled, you want to just make sure, feel with your finger to make sure it's full, and fill in any extra as needed. And there's an important reason why this canister is just the same size as the drill bit, and we want to make sure these are full, because if there's a space, if there's air underneath where we put that mycelium in, then it'll dry out and it won't have those really ideal conditions. But we can see that these holes are now filled in that diamond pattern. Once the shiitake is fully colonized, you'll start to see the mycelium, a little bit of white spotting on the edge of the log, and that's a good sign that you can start to force the fruit. You can start to force those shiitake. So at this point, the last step in this drill and fill process is to seal these holes where we've inserted the shiitake spawn. And this is essentially mirroring the bark, mimicking the bark, protecting the log from drying out, keeping that mycelium from drying out, and also from any critters that might like to eat that. So that is the process, and I want to make sure that the wax is nice and hot. This is just any food grade wax will work, and then we'll just use what I like to use is a little sponge paintbrush for this, and you can just dip that into the wax and dip a little bit onto the top there. So let's see if it's hot. So we have this food grade wax that is just a little below the smoke point, and I'm just going to dab a tiny bit of this food grade wax over the top of each of these holes. And I want to make sure that it's nice and sizzling hot, so that we can seal that with just a little bit of wax. So again, that's going to keep the moisture in, it'll keep other little critters out, and hopefully that will allow enough time for that mycelium, the sawdust spawn, to colonize this log. And again, that takes a little bit of time. So if you see that some critters, maybe some birds, have started to eat that spawn from that hole, don't worry about it. It's okay if that happens. Hopefully that mycelium will have colonized at that point. And I'm going to do this all the way around. You can see all of the holes are filled. And while I'm doing this sealing process, I'm just going to double check that there are no empty holes. That can happen sometimes really easily. So I'll keep coming down here, get a little more hot wax, and dab that on each of those holes. Oh, it's cooling off fast today. There we go. Sizzling. Once you have this log drilled and filled and sealed, then you want to make sure to label them too, especially if you're doing multiple logs with multiple species of mushrooms at different times. Each year you want to know what year you inoculated those mushrooms. So you can get some little metal tags to do that and just staple them on and write that'll indent in the metal so that it doesn't ever rub off, and you'll know. And then finally, you want to make sure you have a good place to put these logs. So as I mentioned, the moisture, the conditions for that mycelium to be able to colonize and for the mushrooms to fruit are critical. And the conditions are moisture, it has to do with air exchange. So what we want is for these logs to retain the moisture that's in that heartwood. So we want to have a space that's fully shaded year-round and protected so that they don't dry out. That is critical. And that's really essentially all it takes to grow mushrooms. It takes a little bit of time and patience also, but we will look forward to seeing some mushrooms from this log next year.